Welcome to the PharmaSource podcast.
As biologics manufacturing gets more complex and regulatory expectations keep rising, sponsors are choosing CDMOs based on their quality track record as much as their technical capabilities. Mohamad Ahmad serves as Vice President of Quality and Compliance at the BMC, where he oversees quality systems across their biologics manufacturing operations. With extensive experience in quality leadership roles across the pharma industry, Mohamad brings practical insights into building robust quality systems and cultures while maintaining the operational agility required in today's contract manufacturing environment. In this episode, Mohamad shares the BMC's approach to quality excellence, from how they've structured their internal quality organisation to support both clinical and commercial manufacturing, to their strategies for transparency and continuous improvement. We'll explore how quality leadership is evolving to meet client expectations, the role of technology in quality operations, and what actually differentiates quality performance between CDMOs. Mohamad, thanks for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me, Dora.
So could you start by telling us about the BMC's facility and what capabilities you built there?
Sure. Maybe I can give you a little history about what the BMC is. So if we go back to COVID, and it's a very interesting story about the BMC. So something became obvious, very obvious, especially in the Canadian ecosystem. We did not have the capacity to actually manufacture at scale and to respond to health emergencies. Whether it's for vaccines or other biologics. So the Canadian government took the initiative to actually build a site. And that site, is the BMC. This is how the BMC came to life. So we're not part of the government anymore. It was actually spun off as a non-for-profit. And the reason for that is to make sure, yes, to respond to health emergencies, but to help the ecosystem as well. So anything that can be produced for the ecosystem, whether it's in Canada or outside of Canada, we discuss with World Health Organizations, the Gates Foundation, anything that can help the ecosystem locally or at the international level will be part of our mandate. So that's something that we take pride in, and this is how the BMC was built. So in terms of capability, so we try to cover the whole biomanufacturing chain. So we have a GMP drug substance manufacturing, both upstream and downstream. We also have drug product filling for vials or syringes, and our own QC laboratory to actually make sure that every production that's done, we can actually test and release internally. So the site was designed mainly around mammalian and insect cell platforms. That allows us to support a wide range of biologics programs. So we have 2 single-use GMP suites. So we can go up to a bioreactor of 2,000 liters, which gives us a lot of flexibility on the type of products that we can get in, whether it's early clinical, late clinical, or commercial. So we can go from really small volumes up to 2,000 liters for that. And the single-use design is really intentional, how the BMC was built. It's really to give us the flexibility to have faster changeovers. So as a non-for-profit, we want to help as many clients as possible. So changeovers is something that's really part of our core values, to make sure that we can adapt really quickly from one client to the other. And run multiple programs at the same time. With the 2 manufacturing suites, that's something that can be done really easily. So the idea was to build a facility that can support the GMP manufacturing while making sure it helps the ecosystem as much as possible. So this is the BMC in a nutshell.
Well, that sounds like a really unique sort of history there. So where do you see the BMC creating the most value for sponsors across the life cycle of a product, particularly as programs move, from late clinical into early commercial?
The way you look at it, where we create the most value is really at the transition points. So you probably hear in the industry a lot, we have the valley of death, and it can be relative on where it can be. So when programs move from preclinical to clinical, or from early phase toward phase 3 and commercial, this is where things really get complicated. So the expectations increase, regulatory scrutiny increases, and the continuity becomes very important. So this is where a lot of programs struggle, because early development decisions are made basically around speed. These programs, they get financing, they want to move fast, they want to reach commercial as fast as possible. And this is where the problems start arising, because you need to keep on track with the regulatory as well. So doing it at speed is normal, as I mentioned, but later those decisions can create problems when you get to scale. So one place where we help a lot is during this technology transfer. So that's where there's small gaps in data, process understanding, documentation. It can turn into delays if not addressed early. So that's something that we try to address as early as possible. So by creating this stable environment, both from the manufacturing and the quality standpoint, this is where I think we can help a lot. For sponsors, what that means for sponsors is fewer handoffs, fewer surprises, and a clear path on how they can actually grow, how the program can grow through all the clinical phases. So what I'm saying is the BMC is really built to cover from early clinical to commercial. So when you have a quality system designed to cover all this path, it does create an advantage where the BMC can help a lot.
Oh yeah, let's focus on that quality aspect for a minute. How has your quality sort of organization evolved as the BMC has grown?
The quality, the way it has grown, it was especially to go back to how the site was built. So really interesting story. It was built during the pandemic in COVID. So we were building the quality program at the same time as we were actually building the infrastructure, the building itself, and onboarding the first client. So that puts us in a position where you have to be very pragmatic and very hands-on. So the quality system wasn't built in a vacuum. It was really built in a real life situation where you actually need to make sure the client is key, and we have the right system to support GMP manufacturing. So within the first 2 years, we actually had our drug establishment license from Health Canada, which allows us to manufacture at a commercial scale, and we're actually able to onboard the first client. Yeah, talking about being pragmatic. So we have operations that expand quickly, and we had to grow as quick with them as well. So we did build a full QA and QC team and expand oversight across the whole lifecycle of the programs. So whether to go from supplier qualification to raw material release to batch review up to a full stability program. So all that was set in place while onboarding the first client. So that would give us, for all the future clients, a good foundation to make sure that quality is involved from the beginning, to make sure that we can take a program to fruition.
So what do sponsors actually need to see from your quality systems when they're evaluating you as a potential partner? What have you seen as the most important, their sort of key consideration in terms of quality?
So sponsors mainly want to understand if the quality system fits where they are in their program. As I said, programs come in at different stages, either early or late in the life cycle of a program. So not every company is at the same stage. An early clinical program doesn't need the same level of complexity as a full commercial product. So that flexibility becomes very important. Sponsors want to know whether the system can support a lean development program while still being strong enough to scale later. So it comes back to making sure that we can accompany a client really from really early, and that continuity becomes important to make sure that we can lead up to commercial, where it becomes profitable for a client. Sponsors would want to know whether the system can support a lean development program while still being strong enough to scale later. So in our case, the core GMP principles are always there, which is, of course, patient safety is always on top of mind, data integrity, and having a good control over the process. But how the system is applied, I think it's really important that it's proportional to the stage of the development. For clinical programs, yes, we want speed. It's fine. And practical change management. For commercial programs, that's where we want to go into depth. So we need thorough validations, lifecycle management, long-term regulatory readiness. I think it's going to be important. So this adaptation, this pragmatism, I think is key. And this is where I think what sponsors would like to see from a CDMO. I think what would they need to look the most for is how the decisions are made. Are the decisions risk-based? Are they scientifically justified? Because it comes down to the science. At the end of the day, the sponsors don't want to know how many SOPs you have on the shelf. They're really looking if you have sound judgment to make sure that they can take care of their program.
So walk me through how you create transparency with your clients around this quality performance, when things are going well, but also when issues arise.
For us, transparency starts with how do you view the relationship with a partner. So we try not to treat clients as just customers. So we want to treat them as partners within their program. So at the start of a project, everything's really aligned. I think communication is very important to make sure everything is clear. What gets shared, when, how decisions will be made. And that sets the tone for a great collaboration. So when things are running smoothly, we share updates regularly. We have quality matrix, batch status, trends, and all that is captured in a quality agreement from the get-go with the client. So this is how we will work. When issues happen, honestly, the approach doesn't really change. It's the same approach. Transparency, communication is key. If something comes up, even though the investigation is still ongoing, and this is where the partnership concept comes in, the client is advised as soon as it happens to make sure that we work hand in hand to make sure we find the right resolution for the issue. So the principle is simple. We stay open, be timely. I think it's key, and honesty. And this is where trust gets built.
Yeah, because trust is the most important thing with these types of complex partnerships, aren't they?
Yes.
Let's move on to talk about technology and sort of digital tools for a minute. So where are you investing in technology right now to improve your quality operations?
The way we see technology is actually pretty simple. We're not looking for the fanciest tools out there, and lately there's been a lot of fancy tools. So it's really about making quality easier to manage day in, day out. So we have an electronic quality management system where everything sits in one place, either deviations, CAPAs, change controls, the whole kit, even audits. So that improves visibility. Nothing gets lost. Investigations are easier to follow. And we also implemented a lot of tools regarding equipment to make sure they're always well maintained. Data integrity is key for us. That's something that's always on top of mind. And we have a very good handle around that. And now I think we're starting to look into AI inequality since it's the new trend. So we're trying to keep up to date. However, I think I'm not sure how this could right now help the space, how AI can be used. So we're not there yet. We want to make sure that the human aspect stays as key for especially a risk-based approach for decision making. So we're still early in that journey from the AI perspective. However, the basics EQMS system is in place to make sure that we can deliver.
Tell me a bit more about that then. How do you think of the balance between the need for human expertise, like you said, and balancing that with automation and digitization for, judgment and quality decisions?
So I think this is a very important aspect of how we conduct business, and especially in our days with technology is growing so fast. We're very clear on that point, however. Technology supports these decisions, but it doesn't replace the experts that we have in place. They're very useful. They help capture data, track events, identify patterns. And even now with artificial intelligence entering the space, that will even improve even further, which is great. Efficiency-wise, that's key. But quality decisions are rarely black and white. You need that sound judgment to make sure that you take the right decision for the client. So that requires context, scientific understanding, and the experience. So the way we look at it, it's simple. Technology helps show what's happening, but people decide what it means. And that's key to actually move forward and take the right decisions.
Let's talk about culture, kind of following on from that sort of people aspect. You can obviously you can have perfect SOPs and systems, but the culture is really what actually drives the execution and the people. So how do you actually go about building a quality culture across your operations?
You're absolutely right about that. The culture does drive the execution. Systems matter, having the right procedures in place matter, but the culture determines what people do when especially when something unexpected happens. And that starts with ownership. And this is what we try to promote as much as possible at the BMC. I think everyone understands that quality is not owned only by quality assurance. So the person doing the work is responsible for doing it correctly and raising issues early. And why I see it, culture also shows up in these small moments. For example, when someone feels comfortable stopping a process or raising a deviation early because it's the right thing to do, that comfort level that person has does show what kind of culture is. That means there's no repercussions. They will be listened to. It's an open communication. People feel free to make sure that they are taking the right decision without any blowback on them. Collaboration is also important. Quality, like I mentioned, we're not there to police operations. Quality is part of the program from the get-go, working alongside the teams and being part of problem solving. The other important aspect is the leadership's role in quality. Again, a classic lead by example. It never gets old, but it's something that's key for any company. When teams see that doing the right thing is supported, well, even if it's not the easiest option, this is where the culture becomes real.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about regulatory. So expectations keep increasing, timelines keep compressing. How do you navigate that?
This tension, I think it exists everywhere now in our industry, and I think it's here to stay. It's not something that's going to change. Expectations, they keep increasing, as I said, but the timelines will stay tight, for sure. So the approach isn't to fight that reality, just to adapt to it as we move along. So we need to organize the work in a way that we can handle these expectations. And if you look at it, a lot of these delays don't come actually from the regulations themselves. They come usually from work being redone, decisions being revisited, or information arriving too late. The worst thing that you can do under timeline pressure is create work that has to be redone later. And this is where the delays and that can really impact how programs are run. Once you focus on making decisions clearly, good documentation, and moving forward, and think a few steps ahead, that is where you can actually manage well the increasing regulatory expectations. So the mindset is important to prevent shortcuts that can actually create problems later.
From your experience then, what would you say typically might put programs at risk as they scale? What needs to be in place so those risks don't turn into delays?
So usually it's not about one big failure. It's not there where programs are put at risk. Usually it's a series of assumptions, and these assumptions stop being true as programs grow. So we're talking about going at speed for early clinical phases to make sure they can move as fast as possible to a commercial scale. But when that work at the clinical scale gets stressed, when it's further along the program, when volumes increase, when you have timelines that overlap, or more teams get involved, this is what really puts at risk programs. So, for example, clinical batch that is run at 200 liters and you want to scale up to a 2000 liter doesn't mean it will behave exactly the same way. Another common risk that's related to that is handoffs. Either it's between development and manufacturing, or from one side to the other, from the sponsor to a CMO. So if the knowledge is not well shared and it doesn't come with the program, and teams end up rediscovering things that were already known, this is what can put programs at risk. Programs that scale smoothly usually prepare for the next stage really early. They make sure the process, the data, and the documentation are ready for what comes next, basically.
So what does a successful quality partnership with a client look like from your perspective?
For me, it's when quality stops being a constant topic. It simply becomes part of how the program runs. It's when questions get answered quickly, so decisions don't bounce back and forth between the client and the CMO. It's when the client knows what to expect from us and what we actually expect from the client from the beginning. And when issues arise, the discussions focus on options and impact and not trying to point fingers or defending positions. And over time, I think this is what will build trust and a great partnership for the client and a service supplier. So when the client feels comfortable moving forward without second guessing every step, this is where I think is a very good partnership. And we know that the partnership is working.
Finally, then, if you were advising a biotech or a pharma client on selecting a CDMO, what questions would you say help sponsors tell whether a CDMO will still be the right partner, years down the line?
It might sound obvious, but I would tell a sponsor to look beyond the first milestone. Think about whether the partnership still works 2 or 3 years down the road. If your first milestone is to get through the qualification batches, then you're going to commercial. Think about that continuity. I think it's going to be key to really choose the right partner for you. Another useful question is, how does a CDMO handle change? Programs evolve, volumes grow, scopes change, timelines, they shift all the time. So can a CDMO adapt with you? Or does every change feel like you're actually starting over? I think this is a key, this pragmatism to make sure you're flexible, to adapt to the client needs. I think it's very important. Another point is also the people. I think this is a key for any organization. A sponsor wants to transfer their program to a CDMO. It's what they work their whole life on. They want to transfer the technology and they want to make sure that people take good care of it. Will the knowledge stay with the CDMO? I think this is a very important question. That continuity is very important. When you share your knowledge, will it stay? Will the people stay and lead you to where you need to be? And maybe a last question would be how transitions are managed. For example, moving from development into a more commercial environment. Or even us as a non-for-profit doesn't mean that the client needs to stay with us for all the commercial batches if they want to scale up. How does the CDMO manage transferring their technology to another CDMO that can scale up even more? So I think these are very important questions to make sure that what's coming ahead in the future, not the first milestone, but several years along the road. How can one partner can help you for that? So for me, those are the questions that usually reveal how a CDMO really operates.
Cool. Well, Mohamad, thanks a lot for your time today. It's been great to speak to you.
Well, thanks for having me.